They congratulated my wife at her father's funeral before his coffin hit the ground.
5 days later, she fired me in front of the board she thought she controlled. My son voted for my termination. My wife celebrated in my chair with my father-in-law's scotch. She had no idea what was coming. My name is Robert Sterling. I am 47 years old, and I've spent the last 23 years building something I thought would outlast me. Not just a company, but a legacy. My father-in-law, William Caldwell, founded Caldwell Medical Systems back in 1981. It was built on medical imaging equipment, diagnostic machinery, the kind of heavy, complex technology that sits in the basements of hospitals across 48 states, saving lives every single day. When I married his daughter Eleanor in 2001, I was just a systems engineer with a Stanford degree and enough hubris to think I could revolutionize the industry. William saw something in me back then. He told me once that I reminded him of himself at 30. He wasn't a man sentimental about much, but he believed in competence. And I was competent. By 2007, when the company needed capital to survive the financial collapse that was swallowing the global economy, I didn't just write a check. I restructured the entire operation. I renegotiated supplier contracts that were bleeding us dry. I streamlined production lines that had become bloated with inefficiency. And I cut overhead by 38% without laying off a single floor worker. William called it magic. I called it math. We survived when 3 of our biggest competitors went under. Eleanor took credit for supporting the family business during those dark years. In reality, she had been running the marketing department, which mostly meant approving ad campaigns other people created and attending gallery openings with potential clients. We have 2 kids. Michael is 22, working in business development at Caldwell Medical, a position that was his grandfather's idea, not mine. Sophia is 19, a sophomore at Northwestern studying journalism. They are both good kids, though they are very different. Michael has got his mother's talent for reading a room and playing to the crowd, always seeking validation. Sophia has got my stubbornness. I didn't realize how much that stubbornness would matter until last week. William's funeral was on a Thursday, and it was stage managed like a product launch. Eleanor wore Chanel pearls and a practiced expression of dignified sorrow that she had probably rehearsed in a mirror for an hour that morning. The service was at Riverside Memorial, the expensive one with the manicured grounds and the little bridge over the koi pond. 200 people showed up, a mix of board members, investors, physicians who had bought our equipment, and politicians William had donated to over the years. I counted 14 people who congratulated Eleanor before William's casket even reached the hearse. 14. One board member whispered, "Madam CEO," squeezing her elbow like she had just won an award rather than lost a father. She smiled that corporate smile, the one she used on investor calls. Warm, but not too warm. Confident, but not arrogant. Practiced. My name wasn't in the program. My chair wasn't in the front row. That spot was reserved for Eleanor, Michael, and the board chairman. I sat 3 rows back next to Sophia, who kept squeezing my hand tightly. She knew. 19 years old, and she could read the room better than her brother ever would. Eleanor gave the eulogy. She talked about legacy, vision, and the future of Caldwell Medical Systems. She never mentioned that I had saved the company from bankruptcy. She never mentioned the 70-hour weeks I had put in for 2 decades. The supplier in Munich I had flown to meet at 2 in the morning because of the time difference. Or the production line I had personally redesigned to cut costs without sacrificing quality. Just legacy, vision, future. After they lowered the casket, people formed a receiving line. Eleanor stood at the center, accepting condolences like she was accepting an inheritance, which I suppose she thought she was. Michael stood next to her, playing the beautiful, grieving son, shaking hands with the same board members who had conveniently forgotten my contributions. Sophia stayed with me. "Dad," Sophia said quietly, leaning in so no one else could hear, "why aren't you up there?" "Because I wasn't invited," I said simply. She looked at me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "What's going on?" "Nothing yet," I told her, keeping my voice even, "but it will." The unraveling started before William's body was cold. On Monday morning, I tried logging into my email and was met with an invalid password notification. I reset it, assuming it was standard IT protocol. But by noon, my access to the financial databases had been revoked. By Tuesday, meeting invitations I had sent the week before were mysteriously canceled and rescheduled without notification. People stopped seeing me on email chains I had started.
The silence was deafening.
Wednesday morning, I drove to Caldwell Medical's headquarters in Foster City, like I had for 23 years. My keycard worked at the main entrance, but when I tried accessing the executive floor, the reader blinked red. Denied. Brenda, the security supervisor, looked embarrassed. She had worked there since 1998 and knew me well. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry," she stammered, checking her screen. "But your executive credentials are under review. The system says it's temporary, just during the transition." "Transition to what?" I asked her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't have details, sir, but I can escort you upstairs if you need." I didn't need an escort in my own building, the building I helped pay for. But I took it. Brenda walked me to the elevator, swiped her card, and pressed 5. The ride up was silent, except for the mechanical hum of the cables. When the doors opened, I saw my office, the one I had occupied since 2004, with the door open and 2 people inside boxing up files. I walked down the hall to the conference room where our weekly operations meeting was supposed to be happening. Through the glass wall, I saw Eleanor at the head of the table, my seat. Michael sat to her right, taking notes diligently. 8 other executives filled the remaining chairs. My chair wasn't there. They had physically removed it from the room. Eleanor saw me through the glass. Our eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. Then she turned back to her presentation, gesturing to a slide I had created last month about Q4 projections. She kept talking. Nobody looked at me. I stood there long enough to feel like a fool, then walked back to my office. The 2 people boxing files stopped when I entered. One was from HR, a kid named Kevin who had been hired 6 months ago. The other was Eleanor's assistant, Jessica. "Mr. Sterling," Kevin said nervously, holding a stack of folders. "We're just consolidating some duplicate files for the transition." "Those aren't duplicates," I said quietly. "Those are originals. The supplier contracts from 2007 to 2012. The patent applications I filed. Personally, my research notes." Jessica stepped forward, looking apologetic but firm. "Mrs. Sterling requested all executive materials be centralized." "Not Eleanor," I corrected her. "Mrs. Sterling." I picked up a framed photo from my desk. It was of Sophia's high school graduation 4 years ago. She was wearing her blue gown, holding her diploma, smiling at something I had said. I put it in my briefcase. "You can have the rest," I told them. By Thursday, they had moved my parking spot. I had owned the same space for 15 years. 3rd row, spot 47, right near the south entrance. When I pulled in that morning, there was a Honda Civic in my spot and a new sign that read, "Reserved, V. Stratton." My new spot was on the 5th level of the garage, the one where the fluorescent lights flicker and the elevators are always broken. I didn't complain. Friday morning, security couldn't find my badge credentials in the system at all. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," the guard said. It was a different guy, younger, didn't know me. "You'll need to sign in as a visitor." I signed a clipboard. A visitor in the company I had saved. A visitor in the building where I had spent half my life. Monday morning came with a kind of silence that precedes storms. I wore a suit, the charcoal Tom Ford that Eleanor had bought me for our 20th anniversary, back when she still pretended we were partners. I arrived at Caldwell Medical at 8:45 a.m., signed in as a visitor for the 5th consecutive day, and took the elevator to the executive floor. The conference room was already occupied. Through the glass walls, I could see the entire board of directors seated around the table. 9 people. Eleanor sat at the head, Michael to her right. The chair opposite her, my old position during board meetings, was conspicuously empty. At 9:03 a.m., Jessica opened the door. "Mr. Sterling, they're ready for you." I walked in. Nobody stood. Nobody shook my hand. The board chairman, Harold Mitchell, a man I had played golf with for 15 years, gestured to the empty chair. "Robert, please sit," Harold said. His voice had that practiced gentleness people use before delivering bad news. I sat and looked around the table. Half these people owed their positions to recommendations I had made. The CFO, Linda Graves, wouldn't meet my eyes. The head of R&D, someone I had personally mentored, studied his tablet like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Robert," Harold began, clasping his hands on the table, "we appreciate everything you've contributed to Caldwell Medical over the years. Your technical expertise has been invaluable." Has been. Past tense. Always a tell. "However," he continued, "given the recent organizational restructuring and strategic realignment under Eleanor's leadership, the board has made the difficult decision to terminate your position,
effective immediately.
The room went silent. I counted to 5 in my head. Let the moment breathe. Then I smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to make Harold's left eye twitch. "Of course," I said calmly. "I understand completely." Eleanor's expression flickered. She had been expecting something else. Anger, maybe. Pleading. Definitely not agreement. "Your severance package is quite generous," Linda Graves said quickly, sliding a folder across the table toward me.
6 months' salary, continued health benefits for a year, and full vesting of your retirement account.
I didn't touch the folder.
That's very thoughtful. We'll need your building access credentials and any company property returned by end of business today," Harold added.
"Absolutely," I said. "I'll have everything to security by noon." Michael shifted in his seat. He looked uncomfortable, like he was watching something he didn't fully understand. Good. He should be uncomfortable. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" Eleanor asked. Her voice was cool, her controlled CEO voice. I stood slowly and buttoned my suit jacket. "Just one thing." Everyone leaned forward slightly, waiting for the outburst. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said. "It's been educational." I walked out before anyone could respond. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I just walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and descended to my car. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Sophia. "Dad, Michael just texted me. Said they fired you. Are you okay?" I typed back. "Fine. Monday will be interesting." She responded immediately. "What happens Monday?" I typed, "Justice. But first, I need to pack my office." I went back inside and collected my personal items methodically. The photo of Sophia, a paperweight Frank had given me, a polished piece of titanium from our first successful prototype, my MIT diploma. Nothing else belonged to me. Anyway, the office felt smaller now, empty. Or maybe I had just outgrown it. By 11:47 a.m., I was done. I left my access badge on the desk, alongside my company laptop and my parking pass. I walked out carrying a single cardboard box. Betty, the receptionist, who had been there almost as long as I had, looked up with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "this isn't right." I paused at her desk and gave her a genuine smile. "It's exactly right," I told her. "Trust me." 2-6 there it seems, and the bracement and it stuck it. Sunkoud's the best memories on Maidlin Williste Fkepton. The house was too quiet when I walked in. Eleanor's Mercedes wasn't in the driveway yet, or perhaps she had parked it in the garage to hide the fact that she was home early. But her presence lingered in the foyer. Fresh flowers she only bought for special occasions, and a bottle of Macallan 25 on the bar cart, uncorked and half empty. It was William's favorite scotch. She had been toasting her victory with her dead father's liquor. I walked through the house we had bought together in 2005, a 4,000-square-foot sanctuary in Atherton, backing up to the nature preserve. We had hosted dozens of company dinners here. William had sat in the den every Thanksgiving, drinking bourbon and telling stories about the early days of Caldwell Medical. That den was where I found her. Eleanor sat in my leather armchair, the Eames I had bought at an estate sale in 2008. The one she had always said was too masculine for the room. She had never sat in it before. Not once in 17 years. Now she looked comfortable, entitled, holding a crystal tumbler with 2 fingers of that Macallan. Her shoes were off, her stockinged feet tucked beneath her. "This is better for both of us," Eleanor said without looking up, swirling the amber liquid gently. "You'll be happier outside the corporate structure, Robert. You were never really management material." I set my box down by the stairs, the cardboard making a dull thud against the hardwood. "Is that right?" I asked. "You're brilliant technically," she continued, her voice slurring just the slightest amount. "But you lack vision, strategy." My father saw it too. Toward the end, he knew the company needed someone who could think bigger picture. "Your father told you that?" I asked. "He didn't have to tell me," she said, finally meeting my eyes with a cold, triumphant smile. I could see it. The way he started consulting with me more, including me in board discussions. He was preparing me to lead. I walked toward the stairs, stopped halfway up, and turned slightly. "Did you ever wonder why he gave me that office safe?" I asked. Her hand paused mid-swirl. "What safe?" "The one in my office. The biometric one, keyed to my thumbprint. Your father installed it personally in 2012. He said it was for important documents." Her expression shifted. Not quite concerned, but close. "What documents?" Eleanor asked. "The ones you should have read before you fired me," I said. I continued up the stairs, leaving her sitting in my chair with her dead father's scotch, drunk on a power she thought was hers. Behind me, I heard the glass clink against the side table, followed by the sound of her standing, her stockings sliding on the hardwood. "Robert," she called up the stairs. "What documents?" I didn't answer. I just walked into my study, closed the door, and called Edward Thorne, William's personal attorney. The man who drafted the documents Eleanor didn't know existed. "Edward," I said when he picked up. "It's time." "Monday," he asked immediately. "Monday," I confirmed. 9 a.m. Sharp. Sunday evening, I met Edward Thorne at his private office in Palo Alto. The building was one of those restored Victorians, tucked between the glass towers and tech startups. Easy to miss if you didn't know what you were looking for. A brass plate by the door read, "Thorne and Associates, Estate Law," in letters so small they discouraged walk-ins. Edward had been William's personal attorney for 43 years. He handled his will, his trusts, and the messy divorce from his first wife back in the 80s. When William called someone family, it meant something. Edward was family. He was waiting in his office when I arrived. 71 years old, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a cardigan that had probably been expensive in 1987. A battered leather briefcase sat on his desk like a faithful dog. "Robert," Edward said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, steady. "I've been expecting this call for 6 years. William told you it would come?" I asked, taking the seat opposite him. "He told me exactly when it would come," Edward replied. "He said, when I'm dead and Eleanor fires him, that's when you open the vault." He unlocked the briefcase and pulled out a thick leather binder, the kind with brass corners and a clasp that looked like it belonged in a museum. Then came a sealed envelope with a red wax seal, my initials pressed into it. Edward slid them across the mahogany desk. "Everything is intact," he said. "I reviewed it again Friday. Not a single document has been challenged or superseded." William was meticulous. I opened the binder. Inside were dozens of documents, organized with colored tabs. Transfer agreements, equity purchase contracts, some dated back to 2007, others more recent. All signed, notarized, and witnessed. "The foundational equity transfer," Edward said, tapping the first section with a manicured fingernail. "When Caldwell Medical needed capital in 2007, you provided $12 million. William structured it as a stock purchase, not a loan. 29% equity, voting rights included." I remembered that time vividly. Eleanor had been pregnant with Sophia. We had used my signing bonus from a patent sale, money I had been saving for a house. William had looked me in the eye back then and said, "This makes you family in the only way that matters." Over the next 16 years, Edward explained, I had acquired additional shares through various vehicles, silent partnerships, custodial accounts, trust structures, all authorized by William, all documented. He flipped to another tab labeled Marital Equity Clause. "When you married Eleanor in 2001, William established a spousal protection trust. If the marriage ended, or if there was proven corporate malfeasance affecting family interests, certain shares automatically transferred to the wronged party." "How many shares total?" I asked, my throat feeling dry. Edward pulled out a spreadsheet and slid it across. Numbers in neat columns, percentages, dates, signatures. 62%, he said. "You control 62% of Caldwell Medical Systems voting shares." The room went quiet, except for the antique clock on his shelf, ticking like a heartbeat. "She doesn't know," I said softly. "Nobody knows except you, me, and the trustee at Wells Fargo who manages the holding accounts," Edward confirmed. William wanted it that way. He called it his insurance policy. Against what? Against his daughter becoming someone he didn't recognize, Edward said quietly. He loved Eleanor, but he saw what she was becoming. Ambitious without substance. Entitled without effort. He told me once, if she tries to erase Robert, she's erasing the wrong man. I picked up the sealed envelope and broke the wax. Inside was a single sheet of William's personal stationery, his handwriting in blue ink. "Robert, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and my daughter has made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry I couldn't fix her. I tried. What I could fix was the company. It's yours now. Don't let her destroy what we built. William." I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. "What's the plan?" Edward asked. "Tomorrow morning, we file a notice of extraordinary shareholder meeting," I said. "Clause 12C of the corporate bylaws. requires immediate board assembly when a majority shareholder demands a restructuring review. They'll fight it, Edward warned. Let them, I said. The documents are airtight. You made sure of that. Edward smiled, the first genuine expression I had seen from him all night. Your father-in-law didn't hire me for my personality. He hired me because I don't lose. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing every document, every signature, every contingency. By the time I left, it was past midnight. The city lights blinked below, like a circuit board powering up for battle. I texted Sophia. Tomorrow changes everything. She replied instantly. Good. Mom's been impossible since the funeral. I typed back. She's about to get worse. Then, she's about to get quiet. 2-6 there it seems, and the bracement and it stuck it. Sunkouds the best memories on Maidlin Williste Skepton. At exactly 9:01 a.m. Monday morning, the email landed in every board member's inbox simultaneously. The subject line was stark, unignorable, and terrifying in its simplicity. Notice of extraordinary shareholder meeting. Clause 12C. I wasn't there to see their faces, but Edward Thorne had described exactly what would happen. The initial confusion, the second read, slower this time. And finally, the cold realization that the email was surgical. It was addressed to the Board of Directors of Caldwell Medical Systems. The text read, per Clause 12C of the Corporate Bylaws, as amended in 2012, the undersigned majority shareholder hereby demands an extraordinary meeting to address the following. 1. Immediate dissolution of current executive appointments. 2. Review of all equity distributions and voting rights. 3. Restructuring of board composition and leadership. Meeting convened today, Monday, December 9th, 12 p.m. Executive Boardroom. Attendance is mandatory per shareholder rights. Regards, Robert Sterling, majority shareholder, Caldwell Medical Systems. The attachments were worse. 12 PDF files, each one lethal and mine. Stock transfer agreements, equity purchase contracts, and the trust documentation showing my 62% controlling stake. All notarized, witnessed, dated, and unimpeachable. At 9:07 a.m., my phone started ringing. It was Eleanor. I didn't answer. At 9:12 a.m., Harold Mitchell called. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:18 a.m., Linda Graves texted, Robert, we need to talk. This can't be legitimate. I texted back a single line. See you at noon. Edward called at 9:23 a.m. with an update. The CFO just contacted me, demanding verification, he said, his voice dry and amused. I sent her the Wells Fargo trust statements and the original transfer agreements from 2007. She hung up without saying goodbye. How long until Eleanor calls you? I asked. She already did, 3 times. I didn't answer. At 9:31 a.m., Sophia called. Dad, she said, her voice breathless. Michael just showed up at my apartment. He's freaking out. He says you're trying to steal the company. I'm not stealing anything, I said calmly. I'm taking back what's mine. He says Mom is having a breakdown, Sophia continued. She's throwing things in her office. Sophia, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? There was silence for a moment. Then she spoke with a resolve that made me proud. I've always trusted you, Dad. You're the only one who's never lied to me. At 10:15 a.m., bonded couriers arrived at Caldwell Medical Headquarters with physical copies of the notification. These weren't standard envelopes. They were black folders containing premium paper. The kind that silently screams, this is not negotiable. One for each board member, hand-delivered. Signed receipts required. Betty, the receptionist, told me later that Eleanor intercepted hers in the lobby. She opened it right there, standing by the artificial ficus tree. She read the first page, then the second, her face draining of color, shifting from confusion to pale recognition. Is this legal? Eleanor had asked Betty, as if the receptionist would know corporate law. Betty had simply shrugged and said, Ma'am, I just answer phones. At 11:03 a.m., Eleanor's attorney, a sharp-dressed shark named Marcus Stone, called Edward. He demanded to know where the shares came from, who authorized the transfers, and whether there were any procedural violations. Edward's response was a masterpiece of legal brevity. Every document was executed by William Caldwell personally, filed with appropriate regulatory bodies, and held in trust per California corporate law. If you'd like to challenge their validity, I'll see you in court. Otherwise, see you at noon. At 11:47 a.m.,
I arrived at Caldwell Medical. I walked through the front entrance, wearing the same suit I had been fired in. Betty's eyes went wide.
Mr. Sterling, she said softly.
Should I? No visitor badge today, Betty, I said, walking past the sign-in sheet. Not anymore. I took the elevator to the 5th floor. The executive boardroom doors were closed, but I could see shapes moving inside through the frosted glass. All of them were there. Every board member. Eleanor stood at the head of the table, her phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically. I checked my watch. 11:53 a.m. I waited. Precision matters. At exactly noon, I opened the doors and walked in. The boardroom went instantly silent. 12 people, one empty chair at the head of the table where Eleanor stood, and me in the doorway. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. This meeting violates every corporate governance protocol, Eleanor said, her voice sharp but struggling for control. I am still the acting CEO. No vote can proceed without proper notice and board approval. Helen Price, the trust administrator William had hired in 2010, sat at the far end of the table. She was 67, with silver hair pulled back tight and reading glasses on a chain. She had administered the Caldwell Family Trust for 14 years and have exactly zero tolerance for nonsense. He holds controlling interest, Helen said, without looking up from the documents in front of her. Per Clause 12C, this meeting is valid. Eleanor's hands gripped the back of the leather chair, her knuckles white. That's impossible. The ownership structure is a matter of public record with the SEC. Helen interrupted her, calm and lethal. Robert Sterling owns 62% of voting shares. He has since 2019 when the final trust transfer executed. You own 18% through inheritance. Your son Michael owns 6%, gifted by his grandfather. Sophia owns 7%. The remaining 7% is distributed among non-voting preferred shareholders. Michael went pale. He had been scribbling notes on his tablet, but his hand had frozen mid-word. Harold Mitchell cleared his throat nervously. Robert, surely we can discuss this privately. Come to some kind of arrangement. All in favor of the motion to restructure current executive leadership, Helen said, cutting him off, in accordance with majority shareholder authority. Nobody moved. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. This is a vote, Helen continued, looking over her glasses. Raise your hand if you support the restructuring motion. Linda Graves raised her hand first, avoiding Eleanor's gaze. Then the head of R&D. Then 3 others in quick succession. One by one, hands went up. Even Harold, after a long, agonizing pause, lifted his hand slowly. Eleanor's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked around the table at people who had toasted her appointment 6 days ago. Every single one of them had their hand raised. Unanimous, Helen said, making a note. The motion carries. Eleanor Sterling is removed from the position of CEO, effective immediately. All interim executive appointments are revoked, pending review. This is insane. Eleanor finally found her voice, shrill and desperate. You can't just... I can, I said quietly, stepping forward, and I did. Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Dad, what are you doing? What your grandfather wanted me to do, I said, looking him in the eye. What I should have done years ago. You don't even work here anymore, Eleanor shouted, and I could hear the desperation creeping into her tone. I never stopped working here, I corrected her. I just stopped pretending you were in charge. Helen slid a folder across the table toward me. Sign here, Mr. Sterling. These documents formalize your position as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer. I walked to the table, took the pen she offered, and signed my name on 3 separate pages. The pen made the only sound in the room, scratching across premium paper like a judge's gavel. When I looked up, Eleanor was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something closer to disbelief. Like she had just discovered gravity worked differently than she thought. The board will reconvene Wednesday at 9 a.m., I announced, capping the pen. Linda, I'll need a full financial review by tomorrow. Harold, audit the last 6 months of executive decisions. Everyone else, your positions are secure. Pending performance review. I looked at Eleanor. You're welcome to attend Wednesday's meeting as a minority shareholder, but you'll need to sit in the gallery, not at the table. Michael grabbed his mother's arm. Mom, let's go. Please. For a moment, I thought she might argue, might make a scene. Instead, she picked up her phone and her portfolio, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the door. She stopped next to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. The same one she'd worn on our wedding day. You planned this, she whispered. All of it. No, I said. Your father planned it. I just executed. She left without another word, Michael trailing behind her like a shadow. Through the glass wall, I watched them walk to the elevator. Eleanor stood perfectly straight, chin up, every inch the CEO she pretended to be. The elevator doors closed, and she was gone. 2-6 there it seems, and the bracement and it stuck it. Sunkouds the best memories on Maidlin Williste Skepton. By 4 p.m., the news had leaked. Someone on the board. My money was on Linda Graves, who had never really liked Eleanor, had tipped off a business reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. The headline hit the website at 4:17 p.m. Caldwell Medical CEO ousted in shareholder coup. Founder's son-in-law takes control. The article was surprisingly accurate. It mentioned the emergency board meeting, the 62% ownership stake, and Eleanor's removal. But what made it viral was the final paragraph, a quote from an unnamed source describing Eleanor's termination of me 5 days earlier as the most expensive mistake in Bay Area corporate history. By 4:30 p.m., the story had been picked up by TechCrunch and Business Insider. By 5 p.m., it was trending on LinkedIn. Someone found our wedding photo, the one where Eleanor was in that dress she had spent $18,000 on, standing next to me in a rented tux that didn't quite fit. The caption read, "Guess who really married into money?" My phone started buzzing around 5:15 p.m. Texts flooded in from former colleagues, investors, and people I hadn't talked to in years. Most were congratulatory, though a few were clearly fishing for inside information. Sophia called at 5:42 p.m. "Dad, it's everywhere," she said. "Michael is losing his mind. Mom locked herself in her office and won't talk to anyone. How are you doing?" "I'm good," I told her, and I could hear the smile in my own voice. "Actually, I'm really good. Grandpa always said you were the smartest person in the room," she laughed. Guess he wasn't kidding. "Your mother made her choice," I said. "Emily made hers, too." "I'm proud of you, Dad." That hit harder than I expected. "Thank you, sweetheart." "There's something you should know," Sophia added, her voice dropping. "Michael showed me a memo Mom wrote 6 months ago. She was planning to force you out even before Grandpa died. She had the whole strategy mapped out. 6 months. While William was still alive, fighting cancer, Eleanor had been planning my removal. "Where did Michael get the memo?" I asked. "He found it in Mom's office after the board meeting. He's really shaken up." "Dad, I think he's starting to realize what she is." At 6:03 p.m., Eleanor's attorney Marcus Stone sent Edward a cease and desist letter demanding we retract all slanderous claims and restore Eleanor to her position. Edward responded with a single-sentence email. "See you in court, counselor. Bring documentation." The real damage started showing up around 7 p.m. A tech blogger who specialized in corporate drama had somehow obtained an internal email Eleanor sent 3 months ago with the subject line, "Operational Efficiency Review." In it, she described me as legacy overhead and suggested my technical contributions, while historically significant, no longer align with our strategic vision. Legacy overhead. The man who had saved the company was overhead. The blogger ran it with the headline, "How to Insult Your Majority Shareholder, a Case Study in Corporate Stupidity." It got worse. At 7:34 p.m., someone leaked a recording from the board meeting where Eleanor had fired me. I don't know who recorded it. Probably someone's phone under the table. But the audio quality was clear enough. Eleanor's voice, cold and corporate. "We're terminating your position, effective immediately." Then my response, calm, measured, almost amused. "Of course, I understand completely. Monday will be interesting." That clip went viral. By 8 p.m., it had 500,000 views on Twitter. People were making memes. "Monday will be interesting" became an instant catchphrase for unexpected revenge. At 8:47 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Sterling," a woman's voice said, professional but warm. "This is Rachel Evans from 60 Minutes. We'd love to talk to you about doing a segment on corporate governance and family businesses. Would you be interested?" "Not at this time," I said, "but thank you. If you change your mind." "I won't," I said, and hung up. The house was quiet when I got home at 9:30 p.m. Eleanor's car was gone. Her closet was half empty. She had taken clothes, toiletries, her jewelry box, and left everything else. There was a note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting sharp and angry. "This isn't over."
I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Mom's at the Four Seasons. Michael is with her. I'm staying at Megan's place tonight. Are you okay? I texted back. I'm fine. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be busy. I poured myself 2 fingers of the Macallan, the bottle Eleanor had been drinking from, and sat in my chair. My chair. In my house. In my company. The silence felt like victory. Wednesday's board meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying William's old leather portfolio. The boardroom felt different now. My name was on the door placard. Robert Sterling, Chairman and CEO. The chair at the head of the table was mine, not by theft, but by documentation older than Eleanor's ambitions. Linda Graves had the financial review ready. She slid it across the table as board members filed in. 9 people, same faces as Monday, different energy. They knew who was in charge now. Before we begin, I said, I want to address the pension fund. The room went still. Linda's jaw tightened. Over the past 8 months, I continued, $4. $2 million was transferred from the Employee Retirement Fund to a discretionary account labeled Executive Operational Flexibility. Can you explain that, Linda? She cleared her throat. Those transfers were authorized by the acting CEO as short-term loans to cover cash flow gaps during the transition period. Eleanor authorized raiding the pension fund, I asked. She said it was temporary, that the money would be replaced within 60 days. It's been 8 months, I said. Where's the money? Linda pulled out another folder and slid it to me. Bank statements, wire transfers, a paper trail that led exactly where I thought it would. Eleanor had used the pension money to fund consulting contracts with firms that didn't exist. Shell companies, her personal slush fund. This is embezzlement, Harold Mitchell said quietly. This is federal fraud, I correct. And every person in this room who knew about it shares liability. I didn't know, Linda said quickly. I found out Monday when I started the audit. I was going to report it. Were you? I asked. Or were you going to bury it like you buried the other irregularities? Her face went pale. I'm not. You're suspended, I said. Effective now, pending a full investigation. If you cooperated with Eleanor's fraud, even passively, you're done. I looked around the table. Anyone else want to confess before the SEC gets here? Silence. Good. Here's what happens next. Every dollar taken from that pension fund gets restored by end of week. I'll cover it personally if I have to. But those 300 employees get their retirement back. Second, we're implementing new financial controls. Every transfer over $50,000 requires dual authorization. Third, Edward Thorne is conducting a full forensic audit going back 2 years. If he finds more dirt, heads will roll. The meeting continued for 90 minutes. We restructured executive compensation, froze all consulting contracts pending review, and established oversight protocols that should have existed years ago. By the time we finished, the board looked exhausted. One more thing, I said as people gathered their things. Michael Sterling is terminated from his position in business development. He voted to fire me, knowing I was the majority shareholder. That's either incompetence or complicity. Either way, he's out. Nobody argued. At 11:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Dad, Michael just showed up at my apartment. He's a mess. Crying. Saying he didn't know that Mom told him you were just an employee. What should I do? I typed back. He's your brother. Help him if you want, but he made his choice. He'll have to live with it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, he said he wants to apologize to you. Tell him I'm at the office, I wrote. If he wants to talk, he knows where to find me. Michael showed up at 2:15 p.m. Betty called from reception. Mr. Sterling, your son is here. Should I send him up? Give me 5 minutes, I said. Then yes. I sat behind William's old desk, my desk now, and waited. When Michael walked in, he looked like he hadn't slept. Red eyes, rumpled shirt, the kind of beaten-down posture that comes from realizing you backed the wrong horse. Dad, he said, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed in. Sit, I said, not unkindly. He sat, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. I didn't know, Michael said quietly. About the shares, about Grandpa's plan, about any of it. Mom said you were just technical staff, that Grandpa was grooming me to take over eventually. She said firing you was necessary for the company's future. And you believed her? I asked.
"She's my mother," he said, looking up.
Why wouldn't I believe her?
"Because you're 22 years old, not 12, I said. "Because you've worked here for 3 years and you've seen how this company operates. Because you were in those meetings when I presented the R&D strategy, when I negotiated with suppliers, when I saved contracts your mother was about to lose.
You saw all of it, Michael.
You just chose not to see." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand.
I'm sorry.
"Sorry doesn't restore the pension fund," I said. "Sorry doesn't undo voting to fire your own father. Sorry is just a word people use when the consequences show up."
I know, he whispered.
I leaned back in my chair and studied my son.
He looked so much like Eleanor.
Same bone structure, same way of carrying himself. But there was something of William in there too. Maybe something worth salvaging. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're fired from Caldwell Medical. That's not negotiable. What you do next is up to you. You can run back to your mother, let her convince you I'm the villain, and spend the rest of your life blaming me for ruining her coronation. Or you can grow up, learn from this, and figure out what kind of man you want to be." "What would Grandpa want me to do?"
Michael asked.
"Your grandfather would tell you that character isn't inherited," I said. "It's built one decision at a time, starting with whether you walk out of here blaming everyone else or accepting that you made a mistake." Michael stood slowly.
Can I call you sometime?
"Not about work, just as my dad." "You've always been able to do that," I said. "You just have to decide if you want to." He nodded, turned toward the door, and stopped halfway. "Mom is planning something. I don't know what, but she's been on the phone with lawyers all week. She told Justin that you haven't won yet." "Thanks for the warning," I said. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet office. Outside, the sun was setting over Foster City, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. William used to say that sunset was the best time to make decisions, when the day's noise had faded and you could think clearly. My phone buzzed. A text from Edward. Eleanor's attorney filed an injunction trying to freeze all corporate decisions pending ownership dispute. The judge threw it out, said the documentation is too solid to challenge. She's got nothing left. I didn't respond. I just watched the sun slip below the horizon and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. 2-6 there it seems, and the bracement and it stuck it. Sunkoud's the best memories on Maidlin Williste Fkepton. The legacy dinner was my idea, not a celebration. William would have hated that, but a quiet gathering of the people who had built Caldwell Medical before it became a brand. We held it at the Rosewood Hotel in Menlo Park, a private dining room for 60 people. The guest list was specific. Engineers who had worked the first production line, the sales rep who had landed our first hospital contract in 1984, the regulatory specialist who had gotten our imaging system FDA approved when everyone said it was impossible. Eleanor wasn't on the guest list because she had never been part of the building, only the taking. The room was warm and understated, with a string quartet playing something classical but not stuffy. It was the kind of evening William would have approved of. No press, no photographers, no performance. Just the right people saying the right things. I stood to speak around 8:30 p.m. after dinner, but before dessert. The room quieted. William Caldwell built something that mattered, I began, looking at the faces around me. Gray hair, lined faces, people who remembered when success meant shipping 5 units a month instead of 500. Not because it made money, though it did, but because it solved problems. When a hospital in Des Moines needed imaging equipment they could afford, William made it affordable. When a clinic in rural Montana needed parts, William made sure they got them. He didn't build this company for a legacy. He built it because people needed what we made. I paused, letting the words settle in the warm air. Some people inherit titles, I continued. Others inherit responsibility. William knew the difference. That's why he trusted the company to people who understood what building actually means. Not the marketing, not the brand positioning, not the quarterly earnings calls. The work, the actual work. The applause was quiet, genuine, and warm. These weren't people who clapped for performance. They clapped for truth. After the speech, I worked the room, shook hands, and heard stories about William I'd never heard before. The engineer who remembered William personally rewiring a prototype at 2 a.m. because the contractor had done it wrong. The accountant who recalled William taking a pay cut during the recession so they wouldn't have to lay off assembly workers. Your father-in-law was the real deal.
one of the original investors told me. A rare breed. He cared more about the work than the credit. I'm glad he trusted you with this. So am I said. At 9:40 p.m., I stepped outside for air. The hotel's garden was quiet, just the sound of water from a fountain and the distant hum of traffic on the 101. Dad. I turned to see Sophia standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow from inside. I thought you were at school, I said. I drove down, she replied, walking over to join me. Couldn't miss this. Grandpa would have wanted me here. We stood together in the garden, father and daughter, watching the fountain recycle the same water in endless loops. Mom called me today, Sophia said quietly. She wanted me to convince you to settle. Said she'd drop all the legal challenges if you gave her a seat on the board and the consulting position. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her that Grandpa didn't leave her the company because she never learned to build, only to take. Then I hung up. I put my arm around her shoulders. That was harsh. That was honest, Sophia corrected. There's a difference. Inside, the quartet started playing again. Someone laughed, the sound carrying through the open door. What happens now? She asked. Now we build, I said. Same thing we've always done. We make equipment that works. We pay our people fairly. We honor the pension fund. And we remember why William started this in the first place. And Mom, your mother has 18% of a company she tried to steal, I said. She'll get dividends, attend shareholder meetings, and live comfortably. But she'll never run Caldwell Medical. That ship sailed the day she fired me. Good, Sophia said quietly. 8 months later, Caldwell Medical announced its most profitable quarter in company history. We had fully restored the pension fund, renegotiated supplier contracts, and landed 2 major hospital networks. Michael had enrolled in a graduate program at Berkeley, studying business ethics of all things. He called every Sunday, and we were working on it. Eleanor settled in Santa Barbara, consulting for medical startups using her maiden name professionally, Caldwell Consulting. She tried to build her own legacy separate from the company she had lost. I heard she was moderately successful, but I didn't follow too closely. Sophia finished her journalism degree and joined the company's communications department. Not because I gave her the job, but because she earned it. Sometimes, late at night in my office, I would sit in the chair William had used and think about the choice he had made all those years ago. Trusting me with his company instead of his daughter. Building protections she never knew existed. He had seen something in me I hadn't seen in myself. Or maybe he had just seen Eleanor clearly. Either way, Caldwell Medical Systems survived. Not because of a name or a legacy or an inheritance, but because of the work. The actual work. And that, I thought, was exactly how William would have wanted it.